It was around 5:30 in the morning. I would leave my bed and tiptoe past my sister's room, tiptoe even greater past my parents' bedroom, and headed downstairs. At this point, it was March, so it was still dark outside. As I made my way downstairs into the lounge, softly I closed the lounge door and I turned on the TV and turned it on to ITV1. It was finally the time I've been waiting over 3 months to watch. And for those of you who are aware of what happens on March every year, it is of course the Melbourne Grand Prix. F1 is taking place in Australia, and I was super excited to be able to watch the first race of the season. I've been waiting literally 3 months for this moment. And as I turned on the TV and watched 20 of the best drivers in the world, or 22 at the time to be fair, as they meandered their way to the grid. 6 a.m. rolled by, and the start of the race. I couldn't sit at this point, the excitement was too much for me, so I was stood in the lounge waiting patiently to start, and there it was, 3 lights, 4 lights, 5 lights, and away we go. It was finally happening. And in that moment, the first race of the season, the first moment in that F1 championship, Rubens Barrichello went in front of Ralf Schumacher, and the back of Ralf Schumacher's car went over Rubens Barrichello at 150 miles an hour. The car slightly grazing the head of Rubens Barrichello. My 12-year-old self could not contain my excitement, and I shouted and screamed at the spectacle that was in front of me. And as you can imagine, at 10 past 6 in the morning, my mother wasn't best pleased. But for me, this was a special moment. The reason being is, I love F1. And I would like to spend a couple moments trying to convince you that Formula One is the greatest sport in the world. Yes, we have had time with athletics. Yes, the football season has just started. But I want to share with you why you should change your opinion on Formula One. You see, Formula One contains now 20 of the greatest drivers from around the world. They get to visit locations everywhere. They have charities set up for young people to get into engineering, into the STEM community. And it has so many historical moments that have taken place. And these are some of the reasons why I consider Formula One to be the greatest sport in the world. Now, there'll be some of you who may beg to differ. I think you're wrong. But there is some of you that may beg to differ. The common thing people share when it comes to disliking Formula One is because they use the word boring. They say Formula One is boring. It is watching 20 cars go round in circles for an hour and a half. Once again, you're wrong, but I understand the perspective in which you have. But the list of the reasons why Formula One is the greatest sport in the world outweigh the list of reasons you may consider them to be a boring sport. Or does it? Because I spent time listing all the different reasons why it is the greatest sport in the world, some of you, it doesn't matter. You still consider it boring. I could stand up here and go through list after list, moment after moment, special occasion after special occasion, and no matter what I do, even short of buying you a ticket, taking you to Monaco, and watching it together, you would still find the sport boring. The value, the importance of you finding it boring outweighs anything I could possibly do. You see, when it comes to Formula One, or many activities, it comes down to how important you find it. The values you hold in it. And there will be situations and other circumstances that you may find valuable, you may find important. I know for some it is certain TV shows. A member of my family thoroughly enjoys watching Judge Judy. For the life of me, I cannot understand why. But to her, it is incredibly important. It holds great value. And so it asks the question, what is the basis of the value? Why is it so valuable? Value is defined as something held in high importance. Something that is held in high importance. You have a device and it means a lot to you and therefore it has value. But value can also be described as something that is important in terms of added value. So you can add value to an item. An item can become valuable because of the impact it has in that situation. I'll give you an example. Some of you may have experienced a situation where you've had a problem with something in your house. In my household, we have our boiler. I say my household, I've since left there, but my family home, we have our boiler. And on occasions, that boiler needs servicing. And my mom has that specific person that she likes to go to get her boiler serviced. And the gentleman will come to the house several hours later than he said he would, but that's the nature of technicians. He'll arrive at the house and he'll knock on the window and mom will invite him in. Naturally, although that we've just cleaned the carpets and the floor, he'll traipse upstairs in his work boots. He'll get to the boiler and spend half an hour to 45 minutes at the boiler. He'll do his checks, he'll do his service, and he will turn to my mom and say, okay, everything's fine, here's my invoice. 250, 300 pounds, something of that nature to service a boiler. And my mom will, after the gentleman's left, come and say, I can't believe I've just given that man that amount of money for 45 minutes of his time. 300 pounds for 45 minutes. I wish I was in a career where I could get that kind of money for 45 minutes. But what mom misses is that she paid 300 pounds so that throughout the winter months, our boiler does not turn off. There is not a situation where we have no hot water, where our house isn't heated. She invested that 300 pounds on the future of the property. But at the time, it was 300 pounds for 45 minutes. The importance is not on how long he took, but the impact he made while he was there. The value is not on how long it took, but the impact that it was there. And so let's look at it from the other side. We've explored this idea of value and the importance of value, and what about on the other side? When things take away from their value. We have, for example, one of my favorite fruits to eat, and I'm sure for many of you it is, the mango. The mango is a gift from heaven. I would defy anyone else to say otherwise. It's a beautiful thing. But inside the mango, you'll always have the seed. Now, the seed is very useful if you're in a country that can grow a mango. But we're based in the UK, and we are never going to be in a situation where we can grow a mango. And so that seed becomes trash. That seed has no longer any value. It had a great value a moment ago, and now has none. It's useless. to the point where we throw it out. Or if we're lucky, we may have a compost heap, I don't know. We get rid of it. Because that no longer has value. In fact, that is a negative impact on what we have. You leave all your seeds with all the other fruit, and you have no room for the rest of your fruit, for the rest of your mangoes and so on. It now has no value and is trash. There are so many things that we hope for the best, we want the best, and it just goes out south. There are things in life where if we could get rid of that thing, life would be so much better. Can you imagine a mango without a seed? You could just peel back the skin and just enjoy it without the seed? Would that not be something amazing? Would that not be something special? I know it would be for me. If you just, they figured it out with grapes. Whoever that person was, I should have researched it beforehand. I praise God for that person who worked out how to remove the seeds from grapes. If you could just figure out the same thing with a mango, oh, that would be incredible. If you could just remove some of these negative elements, it would be so much better. Can you imagine a British summer where it was just sunny? Like during the summer, it was just sun. It wasn't sun, then rain, then snow, then rain, and all this in one day. It was just sun. Can you imagine traveling somewhere and there being no traffic? No other cars on the road, it's just you, and you just drive to your destination, not sticking in first gear to neutral to first gear to neutral. Incredible. In fact, imagine, going back to food, having macaroni cheese without the crusty bit. Or am I alone on this one? No, you guys fan of the crusty bit? Me for one, I prefer the smooth. This perfect world with no waste. Everything is just exactly the way it should be. Wouldn't that be incredible? See, when you're in this place of happiness and you're in this awesome moment, the worst thing that can happen is something takes away from the mood. Something great turns into trash. And yet this is what sadly happened in John. Turn with me, John chapter 8 and verse 4. John chapter 8 and verse 4. What we're going to read right now is an incredible moment, a beautiful moment, an incredible moment destroyed by trash. John chapter 8, so reading from verse 4. Or reading verse 4. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act." I'm going to go back a verse. Let me go back a verse. We're going to go to John 8, 3 and then 4. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery when they had set her in the midst. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act." What a sucky moment. What a terrible moment. What a trash moment. See, what we learn is earlier on in John, we understand what is happening right now. I want you to think about the best party you've ever been to. What is the best party? I assume it had some of the greats. I assume there was Supermalt. I assume there was, fried chicken. I assume there was Costco red velvet cake. I assume it was the party of parties. But see, that party wasn't enough. We're talking carnival level party. See, right now, we are at the Feast of the Tabernacles. The Feast of the Tabernacles. And this, brothers and sisters, was the party. See, what's happening here is this was a festival of thanksgiving. This was a festival of all the amazing things that happened throughout the year, and this was the time to come together. All roads led to Jerusalem. This was the party. In fact, it was customary that if you missed the Feast of the Tabernacles the previous year, that you attend the next year. That's assuming, of course, you don't just go every year. As you walk in and you walk through, you see stalls, you see people waving olive branches, you see everyone coming together in the greatest celebration going. This is the Feast of the Tabernacles. And over 7 days, as was the customary in the parties back then, over 7 days the feasts will carry on. And people bring their fruits and their offerings and their celebrations and bringing it all into Jerusalem. Now, I don't know about you, but I would really want to go to that kind of party. Sounds incredible. It's like camp meeting times 10. All your people are there. All of them are there. And while we're having all this celebrating and all the partying and everything's going crazy, and then something even crazier happens. Jesus shows up. Jesus, that guy who was performing miracles and witnessing and sharing, he shows up. And then there are 3 different camps that are excited about or care about Jesus' arrival. There are 3 different camps. There are the believers, those who believe in the ministry of Jesus Christ. And they're excited he shows up because we can hear a word. We're going to hear a word from Jesus. And then we have another group. We have the scribes and the Pharisees. And they are thinking, man, he's here. This was supposed to be a celebration for us, and then he shows up. See, they believe Jesus didn't have the gallstones to show up at this celebration. This has nothing to do with him and his ministry. No, this is a celebration. He shows up. And then you have the third camp, the on the fence camp. And to be fair, they're just here for the drama. They know how the Pharisees are going to carry on. And they're excited at the idea that Jesus is here. They're not sure what's going to go down, but they know something is going to go down. Jesus arrives. He shares. We read earlier on that during the feast, Jesus says the immortal words, "He who is thirsty, let him come to me and drink." And this is obviously during a time when you're giving the best of your fruits. The wine press is there. These are all the different things that are going on during this feast. And then trash shows up. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the adultery in the very act." In the very act. Now, if somebody was to do that during a party I'd attended, I think the party would pause for the moment. I think the music would stop. I think the drinks would be put down. And all attention, all focus would be on this scenario right here. And so it was. The situation was there for a trap. Trash was placed in front. As we continue the story that we know very well, the scribes and the Pharisees continue to poke Jesus. They say, "Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what do you say?" Verse 6, they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. testing it. But what happened next was something special in many scenarios. Jesus kneeled down, bent down, and started to write on the ground with his finger, as if he did not hear. Now we understand what he was writing. It tells us earlier in verse 7. But here's something that we may have missed. This, once again, was the Feast of the Tabernacles. And all the first food, the first fruits, the first everything came to the table, including the first wine. It was a celebration. And not just that, just before, the day before the festival, was the Day of Atonement. And so what that means is, at this point, once the Feast of Tabernacles had started, all the sins had been forgiven. Each individual had a fresh slate, a clean slate. So whatever happened now was clear. The Feast of the Tabernacles. So when Jesus stooped down and began to write, the idea is that what was written was a sin that may have been performed several years ago. Maybe something when they were studying to become the position they're in now. Maybe they stole a loaf of bread with no number. Or maybe, as this was the final day of the Feast of Tabernacles, maybe what was written on the ground was actions that had taken just a couple of days earlier. Maybe what was written on the ground was happened a couple hours earlier. This wasn't sins from back yonder. These were things that had taken place that week. The scribes and the Pharisees didn't have to throw down this woman. They could have thrown down anyone. Any person that they could have committed sins with themselves. In their effort to throw down trash, instead, they threw down something much more special. Jesus then shared in verse 7, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first." He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. I remember as a child, when we used to come home from school, our mom would tell us to make sure we do our homework. Make sure we studied before doing anything else. And as a very astute listening son that I was, who never disobeyed his mother, on arrival home, I went straight to the TV and watched CBBC, followed by whatever else was on. Time after time. And naturally, my mom would come home and ask the question, "Lyndon, have you done your homework? Have you read? Have you prepared?" And of course, as I said, I was a good little son. I was, "Of course, yes, I've done my homework. Done it to a great degree." And I remember on one occasion, my mom, knowing me better than I knew myself, she went into the lounge, headed towards the TV. Well, I'm not an idiot, so naturally at this point, I turned off the TV, obviously. If I was lucky, I may have had the speed to run up the stairs and then be casually walking down the stairs as she opened the front door. She walked in front of the TV. My heart began to race. How is she going to pick this up? And then I remember raising her hand and resting it on the back of the TV and feeling the warmth from what I was just watching. And it happened in slow motion. I actually just rested a hand on the TV. And it's at that moment I knew, busted. Busted. What can I say? My mom was brought up in a different time. I understand now you can't beat your children. I wish she understood that back then. I got what was coming to me. But I was found out. The sins that I committed, my mom caught me by resting a hand on the back of the TV. And knowing that I'd been caught, knowing that she knew. Man. You imagine standing there. In my head, I can imagine they've already found the stones. They came with an accusative method. They came asking questions to say, well, we could stone her, we can't stone her. But just in case, here's some stones I prepared earlier. I can imagine them standing there ready to go. Some of them probably stretching out their throwing arm, making sure they're ready to move forward. They are stood there ready to throw stones at this trash. And I can imagine just as they're throwing and catching, they look down and they see Lyndon Sweeney watching TV when his mom said he wasn't allowed. And I missed the catch. Stone falls on the floor, and I'm not paying attention. I'm looking at the sin that I've committed. And I can imagine the Pharisees and the scribes doing the exact same thing. Looking down and seeing their specific sin, their specific action on the floor. Busted. I didn't have the luxury of being able to walk away from the situation. But as Jesus carried on writing, as we read, then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. I can assure you that every scribe and every Pharisee and every party, the believers of Jesus, those interested in just the drama, and these two individuals, the scribes and the Pharisees, they will never forget that woman. They will never forget that moment when they stood there in the presence. What they intended for trash actually had value. In fact, had more value than they ever expected. Huge value. And the beautiful moment was this. When Jesus raised himself up, reading from verse 10, when Jesus had raised himself up and saw that no one but the woman, he said to her, "Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?" I can imagine she was face down the entire time, embarrassed by the situation. And for the first time, she raised her eyes, looking up, seeing nothing but the kind face of Jesus and stones and pebbles where the Pharisees and the scribes once were. And she answered, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." I believe even in that moment she felt like trash. But once again, her value was cemented by the importance of Jesus speaking to her and saying, "Go and sin no more." What a powerful story. What a powerful moment. That is how you end a party of parties. What was meant for trash held value. In many situations, it could be considered the favorite trash. The story goes in a lady heads to the hospital. She feels a lump in her womb. Concerned there might be something, but not sure what, she goes to the hospital. They take a biopsy. And sadly, in this case, it is exactly what she thought it would be. She indeed, the results showed cervical cancer. She spent 3 months in hospital doing what they could, but eventually, sadly, she passed. While she lived and before she was ill, she was a tobacco farmer. All she would do is essentially farm tobacco. Couldn't afford to do much else. What makes matters worse is she was a black woman. A black woman living in the United States in